Okay, so now we are on to question type 4, the implied or inferred meaning questions. So as the name implies, this is about information which is implied, or about information where you have to make an inference based upon the information which is given. So, as with everything in the TOEFL exam, you will have to have at least an intermediate level of skills and vocabulary. You already know about the TOEFL vocabulary database, so we won't go into that here. If you are watching this video now and you have not heard about the GiveMeSomeEnglish TOEFL vocabulary database, then check out the video about the factual information and detail question summary, and also the vocabulary questions. Those two videos, the summaries for those two videos, give you quite a good knowledge and give a good description of the TOEFL vocabulary database that I've created. So you definitely need to have the intermediate level of English skills and vocabulary. You will also need to have the ability to scan for specific information. Now, you also need to know what is the meaning of the word implied or inferred. Now, the writer will state something in the reading passage, and because of that information, you can make an inference, which is a logical conclusion based upon the meaning which is implied. Now, a lot of times when we're communicating something to someone, we can give them the meaning about something without directly stating it. And that's what this question type is testing. It's testing our ability to understand the meaning of something which was not directly stated. So that's essentially it. You need to go through the reading passage and use the information that was given to come up with a conclusion about what was meant by that information. So the way that you identify these question types, they always start with something to the effect of according to the paragraph or according to the reading passage, what was implied about or what can be inferred about. Now, the difference between these two meanings is that it is the writer of the text that is implying the information. It is you that is inferring the information. That's the only difference. The end result is still the same. You're making a conclusion based on the information that was given. And then here, let's take a look at a couple of the examples. It looks basically the same. You have a reading passage. The question stem says, according to the paragraph, what can be implied about the condition of the temple before the 20th century? Now, in the answer choices, this is very similar to the factual information and detail questions in the sense that you will use the answer choices to scan the reading passage to find out if this was true. But with this question, you are not looking for information that was directly stated. That's exactly the point of this question type. So, if when you're going through the answer choices, you find an answer where the information was directly stated in the article or in the portion of the reading text that's in question, then that's not the answer. If they give some information which is not true, that's also not the answer. But if they give an answer which is something, as I've said numerous times already, it's a logical conclusion based upon the information that they stated. So let's take a look at this one. According to the paragraph, what can be implied about the condition of the temple before the 20th century? Okay, so the keywords here is temple and the phrase before the 20th century. So obviously we're not going to be looking for anything after that time period. We're going to be looking for something before that time period. So we can look for that information here, but with this question type, it is much better to go through the answer choices to find the information and then eliminate the wrong answers. That's the quickest way you can do this. The Cambodians' work was interrupted. Okay, keywords here, Cambodians' work interrupted. So let's scan through here. Well, we have Cambodian Civil War. Work was interrupted. There is a phrase right there. Well, that phrase is exactly as it was written here. Work was interrupted. Work was interrupted. Okay, now it says that the work was interrupted by the Cambodian Civil War and Khmer Rouge. Okay, so it's slightly different information, but we have the exact phrase mentioned in both those situations, so that's not the answer. relatively little damage was done during this period. So the keyword here, or key phrase, damage done. So we have to find either the word damage or something that is relating to damage. We already didn't have it up here when we were scanning through the last one. So let's see. Structures, shootout, Khmer Rouge, Vietnamese, pulled bullets. Far more damage was done after the wars. Relatively little damage was done during this period. Okay, so here, without really looking any further, we have damage and damage, but here it's saying far more damage. This is relatively little damage, so this is false information, so this is not the answer here. Okay, so the next one we have, the temple was not in very good condition. So we've already heard about bullet holes in the bas relief. Thieves claimed almost every head that could be lopped off the structures. So this is talking about a lot of damage. Plus we said far more damage was done, so we need to go back. Now it says the 20th century saw considerable restoration. Okay, restoration is related to damage, because if you're repairing damage on a building, that is directly related to the word restoration. And it says here we have dates, 1970s and 1980s. Okay, well, this is the 20th century. Work was interrupted by the Civil War. Okay, well, obviously the damage that they did is not going to happen after they started. So the 20th century saw considerable restoration. Okay, restoration in the 20th century. What we have here is the condition before the 20th century. Okay, well, if they're doing the restoration in the 20th century, then that implies that the temple was not in very good condition before they decided to do the restoration. So that actually fits here, but for the sake of the video, let's look at the last one. A lot of damage was done to the temple. All right, well, we already know that by scanning for the information for the previous one. So the temple was not in very good condition. It never said anything about that before the 20th century. They did talk about damage, which happened in other time periods, but it can be implied, or we can infer, that because they were doing restoration, then the temple was not in good condition. So this is the answer. Now, in explaining this to you, I spent a lot more time than you should spend in trying to find the answer, but I wanted to demonstrate how to actually find the answer. So with this one, since we need to come up with a conclusion, as I mentioned before, we have to find a conclusion about information which is implied. In other words, it's not directly stated. And we saw here that this information was not directly stated. We needed to come to this information by looking at the information and making a conclusion about restoration, damage before the 20th century. So that is the same process that you will use to answer this question. And as with all of the question types, and we'll get into this with the skills and or the tricks and the traps, and with the skills strategies, that you should never spend anything more than a minute on each of these question types. I spent more than a minute on doing this only because I was demonstrating the process to you. So the most important thing is, if the answer choice is directly stated in the reading passage, you can eliminate that answer. You don't even need to think about it. If it is information which is opposite or false or somehow different than what they stated, it's still not the answer, because this is, we're not looking for false information like with the negative information in detail questions. So you can eliminate the false answers and the answers which were directly stated, and then spend a little bit more time on the one answer which you have to do some logical conclusions with. And you could even save time, because if it's not false and if it is not directly stated, that's probably the answer. But of course, if you have more time, then definitely check the answer to make sure. But that is the answer choice for this question type. You need to make an inference about the information that was implied, and that inference is a logical conclusion based on the information that's in here, but which is not directly stated. And that's essentially it for this question type, the implied or inferred meaning question type. And so I guess I will see you in the next lesson.